TV stations will leave that out. My sister, please come.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. Always a pleasure to listen to you. Okay, we definitely recognize everybody here. As we said earlier, you are all distinguished guests, and we truly appreciate that you could make out time from your busy schedule to be here this morning. It will be worth your while. We want to bring up some people who will play major roles in this event upstage. Please, a seat has been reserved for you over there. So as we introduce you, welcome you, a round of applause for them, please. And we really want you to come up stage and take a seat over there. We have the chairman of this event around now. He's finally here. Okay, Professor Anya O. Anya, we've been looking out for you. Thank you for coming in. And you kindly come up stage and please take a seat over there. We will be calling you up very soon to also do the welcome address. I mean, one of your address. And then Professor Wole Soyinka. I'm honored to meet you today, sir. Very honored. And thank you so much for having this at heart.
I'm sorry. Doesn't this one deserve a standing ovation? Wole Soyinka. Wow. Oh, 4 years. Or I say, no. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. He does deserve that. Okay, and we have Professor Pat Utomi, who you've also already seen before, but you still have a place upstage. Welcome, sir. Thank you. And then we have Banji Akintoye. Can we please welcome him?
Professor Banji Akintoye. That's the strongest man in the whole of the Yoruba nation now, who's trying to bring us all together. When is it time to talk? I'm going to give you his bio data. Very intimidating, I must tell you. I'm proud that you're a Nigerian, and I'm happy about the pan-Nigerian nature of this August gathering of today.
Professor Banji Akintoye, thank you so much. So great to have you here. Then we have Eze Chukwuemeka. He's also here, and we will want to have him upstage. A round of applause for him as he takes his seat upstage. Today is a history-making event, and we want to believe that at the end of this event, we would have greater stories to tell, better stories to tell about Nigeria. Thank you. Having done that, we will be welcoming, we would want to hear from the convener of this event. He would be making his welcome address. He's here, but he's having some challenges with his health and a cold that it's not allowing him to talk very well. So his deputy, Professor Chika Moore, will be making his speech for him. Chika Moore, Professor Chika Moore, if he's here, please let's welcome him. He's a deputy leader, Nzuko, Umunna. A round of applause for him.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My respected elders, both socially and academically, because I can see some giants that I tremble and bow before. The academy over here, over there. And I see the royal fathers, I see my spiritual fathers, and all you. So please permit me. Let me not go into the protocols before I make a mistake. I see distinguished people, so but just let me not go into the protocols and let them make a mistake. I have to read the address of the coordinator, Nzuko Umunna. A welcome address presented by Mr. Ngozi Joseph Odumoko, the coordinator of Nzuko Umunna, at the Never Again conference being held at the Muson Center, Onikon, Lagos, on the 13th of January, 2020. It is my pleasure to welcome us all to this historical event, a solemn opportunity for us as compatriots to constructively embrace and discuss the Nigerian Civil War 50 years after, and prefer pragmatic steps towards palpable reintegration and unity as a nation. 50 years after the Civil War, there is need for a national reflection that will herald a new chapter in our nation's history. This conference is set to address those issues that led to the Civil War and create a platform to promote dialogue, justice, integration, peace, and development. Nzuko Umunna is planning on institutionalizing this lecture and hoping to make it an annual event. May I now ask that we all rise and give a minute's silence to all those who lost their lives in the Nigerian Biafran War. May their labors never be in vain, and may their souls rest in peace. Thank you, gentlemen. Nzuko Umunna, a think tank comprising of Igbo professionals, both at home and in diaspora, which prides itself as unrelenting bridge builders in partnership with Ndigbo Lagos, has assiduously put together this event in appreciation of the unbreakable link between healing from the effects of the war and our moving forward as a nation. There is no gainsaying that war has never been the best option in any conflict resolution, and in most cases has led to unfortunate loss of lives, property, and erosion of trust, as reflected in the fact that Nigeria is still suffering from the effects of the Civil War 50 years after. But the most critical thing for us to do this time as a people is not to keep apportioning blames or suppressing sincere discussions about our past and the cause of the Civil War, but to ask ourselves if we are really making sufficient efforts towards ensuring healing, forgiveness, and integration, which are necessary steps in forestalling reoccurrences. Many Nigerians believe, through the observations of the unfolding political and economic activities in Nigeria, that Ndigbo are yet to be fully reintegrated in the real sense of it 50 years after the Civil War. We all can agree it is time Nigeria became a true nation capable of fulfilling its potentials as the giant of Africa, blessed with diverse human and natural resources. This can only be achieved by reintegrating all ethnic nationalities, by truly exhuming and implementing the deep intentions of the 3 R's agenda, which was hinged on rehabilitation, reconstruction, and reintegration. 50 years today, while receiving the instrument of surrender from the Biafran officials, the federal government placed Nigeria on a high pedestal in the Committee of Nations by making 2 declarations. 1, the no victor, no vanquished principle. And 2, the 3R, reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction policy. 50 years after, it's time, even overdue, to do a reality check. Have we kept faith with the laudable no victor, no vanquished principle, or have we observed it more in the breach? Was the policy a mere window dressing, or did we rigorously pursue it? Were the subsequent policies and actions of government consistent with this policy, or did we conveniently forget we had made that strong commitment? Did we genuinely seek to reconcile and be reconciled, or merely paid lip service to it? Did we truly seek to rehabilitate those in need of rehabilitation, or have we continued to rehabilitate those already over-rehabilitated? Did our reconstruction efforts pay any special attention to the very theater of the unfortunate war? War, undesirable and unfortunate as it is, often provides opportunity for outstanding innovations and technological advancements. Did we proactively seek to harness gains thrown up by this unfortunate war, or did we reactively consign such silver lining to the trash can? These are key questions we are going to answer in this conference today, and thereafter direct our future actions in line with the answers. As I call on all to forgive and heal, we must remind ourselves too that healing and forgiveness can only be deeply achieved through justice, fairness, peace, prosperity, progress, and development. Let us appreciate our diversity and eschew hatred, discrimination, suspicion, marginalization, bigotry, and parochialism through emphasizing more on the things that bind us together and less on our differences. We are not there yet, but we are surely not where we were before the handshake across Nigeria. Let's continue to strengthen friendship and consolidate on the gains of the handshake across the Niger as we profess that never again will we have to kill in resolution of conflicts. Therefore, we are hoping to use the symbolism of the handshake that will be coordinated in this program by the traditional rulers to commence the conversation and process of nationhood. Finally, I deeply thank leaders and citizens from all over the country, our friends from the international community, gentlemen and ladies of the press, the leadership and members of Nzuko Umunna, Ndigbo Lagos, and the conference partners for your presence here today and sacrifices towards ensuring the success of this conference today. We will all take succor and satisfaction in the outcome of this conference. I wish us well and plead for God's protection as we head back to our various destinations. Long live Nzuko Umunna. Long live conference partners. Long live Nigeria. Thank you.
That's the welcome address. Your hands please together again. For the coordinator of Nzuko Umunna, Mr. Joseph Ngozi Odumuko, who couldn't be here, as you heard my colleague say earlier on, has a health challenge. But all the same, we've noted your assistance. Thank you. Now in the hall, we'll do some slight more introductions, just so we pay our introduction debt, as I say all the time. Mazi Sam Uhuabunwa, thank you very much. A great Nigerian who's made his mark. Your hands together for him. Thank you. Mr. Akin Oshuntokun used to be the MD News Agency, a great thinker, the man who has been in the forefront of having restructured Nigeria. Thank you. God bless you. Dr. Ray Obieri, thank you very much. A successful banker, a great Nigerian who has done so well. Professor Yem Tsien is making it the middle belt. Your hands please together. As I said earlier on, it's a pan-Nigerian event. I'm very happy about that. Of course, Onyeka, can we say too much about Onyeka? Onyeka has taken us to the world. Now, the argument is this. We gave Onyeka to the music industry. Onyeka is a born broadcaster. We are proud of you, Onyeka, all the time. Thank you. You need to hear Onyeka talk. In fact, Queen said, no, we speak grammar, reach you. I'm not going to tell you that. No, thank you. More additions here. Thank you. Go ahead.
We want to recognize Dr. Mrs. Jidemma. We are glad you're here. A round of applause for her. Mrs. Ndidi Wuneli, of course, you know she's been winning so many accords for Nigeria. A round of applause for her. Welcome, ma'am. Mrs. Amaka Ezechukwu, Rep. Adorable Foundation International. She's here. Can we recognize you? A round of applause for her. In our midst, we also have Engineer Victor Amoha, member Ndigbo Lagos Leadership. A round of applause for him. Welcome, sir. Senator Naya Abaribe is here. A round of applause for a very vocal man who stands for unity and progress. We're glad to have you here, sir. We have Mrs. Violet Obiora. She's here, woman leader of Ndigbo Lagos chapter. Welcome, ma'am. Good to have you here. Chief R.C. Okafor is here. A round of applause for Chief R.C. Okafor. We're glad to have you here, sir. And we also have Chief Engineer Aka is here. A round of applause for him. And then we have, okay, he's been recognized, Mazi Samuel Habunwa. And that's the march for now. We will also bring more to you as they come.
I actually asked her to do it because, you know, you men would like women to recognize you. Your hands together for my colleague again. Now, as she was doing that, the former Chief of Naval Staff also came in, a Nigerian and an international personality. Ladies and gentlemen, your hands together for retired Vice Admiral Alison Madueke. All along with us here, who actually has turned himself into one of the masters of ceremonies, helping to make sure that everybody's being properly taken good care of, is Mazi Alex Oti, a successful banker, a philanthropist, who will become Abia State Governor at God's own time, by God's grace. Thank you very much. Now, our chairman has got to receive us and talk to us. Even though you knew this, each time I Google up, I see new things about him. Our chairman, ladies and gentlemen, is a professor whose work in parasitology is known worldwide. He's a man who is very much there for the Nigerian cause. He never, ever failed to talk when he's supposed to. Ladies and gentlemen, he has a long, long, long profile here. Then let me just spare you that. We'll do that later on. But Professor Anya O. Anya is chairman of this event. I'd like him to please come and welcome us formally. And the woman who has been keeping the home front intact in the past over 50 years is also here with us. Your hands please together for the wonderful woman. Thank you.
Happy New Year, every Nigerian.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'll also take the easy way out, which is to be un-Nigerian by not listing all the protocols that ought to be listed. Because in a place like this, when you start from my Egbon, Wolesho Inka, down the line, by the time you finish, you may remind people about the weight that this hall is carrying at this time. And it's not my intention to help in that situation. My job as a chairman, I conceive in a very narrow perspective, which is to create the ambience in which a proper discussion can take place. So today is not the day I make long speeches, not the day that I advance new ideas. Mine is to create the opportunity for others who have ideas to put them forward before the Nigerian people, and for those of us who are careful in this country to digest those ideas and see what we can make out of it for the future of this country. Because it is clear that our country, at the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, is in trouble. And one of the troubles, I suggest, is because we went through a tempestuous period that led to the war and after the war. As a biologist, I know the human brain is constructed to take information immediately. But it is when you sleep and reflect, that is when you have not only effervescent memory, but memory that can now endure, you can use in planning. So the brain is meant to reflect, and Nigerians have never reflected on their past history since the beginning of the independent period. This is the first opportunity for us to do so, and I would therefore want those who have new ideas to advance them. But I will make 3 points. First is that our situation is not unique. Other countries have gone through this, and we should learn from their lessons. For example, some historians suggest that because of the reparations and other, quote, injustices that the Germans thought were imposed on them as a result of the First World War, that was why they prepared for the Second World War, and that was why the Second World War, the horrendous war that it was, came to be. In other words, justice for all is an important principle if you want to build an enduring nation. The second point I want to make is that this conference we are holding now should have held maybe 40 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So we are really late in having this conference. But it's better late than never. Nigerians have to reflect on the road we have passed. For example, the proposition can be made that we went to war because there was a failure of leadership. And in saying that, I will remind us that the 3 regions were really doing very well before the katakata began. Take the Eastern Nigeria, which I'm a bit more familiar with. Some work by some economists at the Michigan State University at that time said Eastern Nigeria was the fastest growing and industrializing economy in the world. I didn't say in Africa. It is not usual for those who are benefiting from a situation to go to war to lose everything that they had. So there must have been a reason. Because it looks foolish if you were so comfortable in Nigeria, despite its wars and all, to just put everything into the balance and go to war. The war is not a little child, it's not children playing, it's serious business. When you go to war, you either win or lose, and if you lose everything. So when we talk about marginalization and so on, we should go back to the roots of where our failures began from. The second point I want to make is a simple one. Germany fought the World War and lost. Japan fought the World War and lost. But in less than 30 years after that war, Germany was the leading economy in Europe, stronger than the economies of the winners. Japan was the second largest economy after the United States until the miracle of China started. In other words, losing a war does not necessarily give you a badge of failure. If you do your homework well, and you help create an environment in which there is no winner, no victor, no vanquished, as General Gowon said, then by now, we would have had many centers that would have been driving this economy, that would have been driving this society, and we wouldn't be where we are. But we have not learned lessons from our own past, and we have not learned lessons from the experience of others. Let us therefore hope that we will live here wiser and more determined. I realize that the kind of challenge we now have in Nigeria, in some ways, not anticipated. It is not usual, as Banji Akintoye in his speech has alluded, that you start running a country as if there is not a national program enjoyed by others, but a minority program, a minority agenda. Of course, good words are not sufficient. What you do is what says what should happen. But one thing I need to say is that despite all the provocations from east, west, north, and south, let Nigerians eschew violence. Violence will not provide the answer to the Nigeria we want to build. However much you may feel provoked, non-violent engagement is a recommended way. As the good old book says, those who wield the sword usually die by the sword. This is a new decade. This is a new year. Nigeria will definitely move in the right direction sooner than we realize. Thank you very much.
Well, what do we expect from an international personality who got properly grounded from St. John's College, Cambridge, England, and as I said earlier on, a great authority in the area of parasitology. Your hands please together again for Professor Anya O. Anya. Thank you. More recognitions. My sister is here, but let me say this. Sitting with us, no wonder when he came in, everybody was bowing and trembling, you know, and Railway Corporation and National Christian Elder. He played a major role.
Live on the Facebook page, Nzuko Umunna Facebook page, and you'll be able to get the link and send it across to any person who wants to connect with this event. It's very important that everyone who is a stakeholder knows that such an event is happening here. So more recognitions, and please would also want to mention that we may not be able to continue with the process of recognition because we are here for serious business and we would need to focus on that. So at a time we may have to stop and continue with the event as the coordinator is pleading with every one of us. But we over Hotels Limited, a round of applause for him. Thank you for being here. And it's a good one because we need people from all spheres to be here. We have Mr. Frank Nweke II, former Minister of Information. He is here. A round of applause for him. Welcome, sir. Good to have you.
I'd like him to please rise for recognition. I want to be sure that Frank is here, actually. Where is he? Oh, can you imagine? Your hands please together for this fantastic man. Very, very simple.
Thank you. Then we have Chief Sonny Iroche here. A round of applause for him. Please, let's recognize you. And we have Chief Enyi Onokala here. A round of applause for him. Okay, we also have a renowned member who's leading something quite interesting that I believe we'll all with some SIP members well represented. A round of applause for Chine. Okay, I'll hand over to my senior colleague.
We'll be doing it together, no problem at all. Now, let's put it this way. Take a good look at the very strong congregation, if you like to put it that way, or aggregation of those to be interacting with us today. Not all of them could make it. She was to have flown here, but she couldn't make it. She had to drive from Enugu. Please, your hands together for her, because she thinks this is very important. Well, former head of state, Yakubu Gowon, I call with a lot of respect. He played a major role in the one he calls no victor, no vanquished. Would have loved to be here. You know him. He's praying for Nigeria on his 5 minutes. Thank you. We're going to be seeing it through the screen here. Thank you.
His speech was given to people too.
Oh, okay. That's right.
His speech also has been printed out. I don't know if you've gotten a copy of that. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes of that clip, and we'll expect that everyone would have the speech as well. Thank you.
Well, the civil war that we reluctantly have to go into came about as a result of various political disagreement on many issues, going back into Nigeria's history to the time that we had the first military intervention in government, the first coup d'etat we had. And of course, the attempt with what happened at that time, certainly anyone with conscience know that it is something that is bad and something that we've got to try and put right. And various political political attempts were made to solve the problem, going even to Aburi meeting, the disagreement there, which really came about the interpretation, interpretation, of the interpretation, of what Aburi meant. And from Ojukwu, he says, on Aburi, start interpreting the way you want and the way you want to force it on the rest. Then, of course, we also have a way of resolving that issue. But the civil war, unfortunately, had to happen as a result of breakdown of that Aburi agreement. Despite effort that was made, to see if we can reconcile our differences and really save a very serious situation. But it got to the stage whereby we had got his Constituent Assembly to give him the go-ahead to break away from Nigeria. And of course, then because of this tense situation, we have to find a way of resolving that problem. And one of the major problems that we had at that time was the fear of the domination, of the North, politically, also regionally, and population-wise, etc. And so we had to find a way of resolving that particular problem. Now, regions at that time, the 4 regions we had, they are all very big and powerful. And of course, anyone can threaten to break up the country. And this is something which some of us certainly did not, agree to, because we saw allegiance, to the country, to defend the country, and it's from either internal or external, attack, and so that was, what happened, and so as a result of that, every effort that was made in order to resolve the issue failed, and it got to the stage when this Constituent Assembly statement was became almost a threat to the breakup of Nigeria. We had to do something, to remove, that what causes that fear. And politically, I thought the only thing that we should do was, to create, to break up the, all those regions, and to ensure that, no region and now new states would be too big to be a threat, to the unity of the country, and the fear of, the fear of that domination by one particular, state will no more be a threat. and at least within those states that in fact will create, at least they will be equal in every respect and making their contribution to the unity of the country. But when that failed, of course, what I had to do then was to say, okay, create, states. And I can assure you it was a big battle, to break up the North, which was about 2/3, the size, of the country at the time, to break it into a number of, states. And then, of course, the East also had to be broken, because of the demand. Some parts of that, region certainly did not want to go along with, the major part, of that region. That is the Ogoja rivers, Calabar and rivers. Those areas certainly wanted to be able to have a say in a new Nigeria that we are going to build. The same thing in the North, we had to break it into six states. And in the West, we tried to do that, but it was not possible for us to do it, but only in Lagos State that was created now, because that was the federal capital. And so, it was even not part of the West, at the time. And the West did not want that to happen. But in the end, however, I took part of what was then West. That is the old colony, Epe, Ikorodu, Ikeja, and Badagry. So those, that was part of old, colony of Lagos that, was taken and added to the federal capital of Lagos, at that time, and to form a Lagos state. So just a little bit of the West was taken, and so that was that became the new states, that the new Nigeria that we wanted to have. And of course, the eastern region under the command of Nzuko at that time said no. And so we have to said, well, these other people have been created and we have to defend them. And of course, he said that will not happen. And of course, as a result of various activities that he took, taking over federal government, central bank, taking over, the railway stock, that's the railway train from Port Harcourt going.
Well, thank you very much. I was resisting the temptation to ask us to stop it, but I think we can visit the address we have a copy of, look at it, and let's see how it goes. Your hands together then for General Yakubu Gowon, GCFR, former head of state of this Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, if you look at what we've advertised for some time here, we have special guests of honor. They're already seated. We also have panelists. And amongst the panelists, we have Professor Yemasen, we have Onyeka Owenu, we have Chief Femi Adeni Williams, Femi Fani Kayode, who would have loved to be here, but I think he's bereaved. He lost his father-in-law. And we also have here Mr. Olisa Agbakoba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Sheikh Hussaini, and of course, Mr. King Oshuntokun. What we're going to be doing is we have a couple, we also have what we call the keynote addresses here. And we'll start first from Professor Banji Akintoye, whom, as I said earlier on, has a very rich history, has a rich background, as an academic, historian, and writer. Attended Christ School at Ekiti, Nigeria, studied history at the University College, Overseas College of the University of London, and doctoral studies from the University of Ibadan. He is very well known all over the world when we talk about political history. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor Banji Akintoye. And thank you very much for this very big applause for him. Thank you. Ambassador George Obiozo, thank you very much for having been a great Nigerian who've taken us to the world. Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Eminent elders, leaders, and citizens of our country, Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, we who are here assembled, and the rest of Nigeria out there, owe a great debt of gratitude to our men and women who thought that Nigeria must celebrate this important day in our country's history, and who put the arrangements together to enable us to assemble here now. This day, 50 years ago, we Nigerians saw the end of a bitter and sanguinary civil war in which two sides of our country had been pitched against each other for fully 30 months. A war which had directly and indirectly taken the lives of millions of our citizens and had left the lives of more millions shattered. I assess that we are assembled to mark this day for two important reasons. That is, apart from celebrating and honoring the ones whom we lost, the millions whom we lost in the Civil War. First, we are assembled in gratitude to God that our Civil War came to an end when it did, and that it did not continue beyond that day to go on inflicting more deaths and more wounds on us, citizens and peoples of Nigeria, and of our country as a corporate entity in the world. Secondly, and more importantly, we elders, leaders, rulers, and citizens of Nigeria are assembled here today before the world and before the ruler of all peoples and nations to assert that we, the people of this country called Nigeria, will never again manage the affairs of our country in such a way as to lead to war among us. It is hugely providential that we are registering this resolve today before the world and before the creator and ruler of the world. I say providentially because as an elderly citizen of this country now, and as a citizen who was already a young university teacher in the time of our Civil War, I have good reasons to fear today that the character of the affairs of our country these days and the prevailing mood among us Nigerians are chillingly similar to the character of the affairs of our country in the months leading to our Civil War. The government of our country is being managed in ways that make it look like an exclusive preserve of a particular minority. There seems to be an agenda being pursued now to establish this minority in all positions of command in the executive, administrative, judicial, and security services of our country. The voices of the majority register protests continually and are continually disrespected and ignored. The state of law is patently being subsumed to the needs of that agenda, with seriously damaging effects on human rights. These situations are inevitably fostering among the peoples of the Middle Belt and the peoples of the south of our country the feeling that they are being reduced to the status of conquered peoples in Nigeria. Meanwhile, some persons belonging to the would-be minority conquerors are loudly threatening to overrun and seize the ancestral homelands of the said peoples of the Middle Belt and the South, and are actually pushing for that conquest with their acts of destruction of farms and villages, acts of wanton killings of people, acts of kidnapping, acts of intimidation, and the act of bringing masses of their ethnic kinsmen from countries beyond Nigeria to seize and possess land by force and intimidation in Nigeria. And meanwhile, the government of Nigeria seems to be purposed not to defend the threatened peoples of Nigeria, but to aid the process of the conquest. The outcome of all this, as we assemble here today, the outcome of all this as we assemble here today is that our country is divided again into two hostile parts. The minority that, the first part is the minority that seems bent on conquest and ethnic cleansing, and the majority that is striving with great handicaps to preserve their homelands and their existence and integrity as peoples. Meanwhile also, as a manifest corollary to these fearsome developments, the dreaded fundamentalist terrorist movement, ISIS, after being vanquished in the Middle East, has established its new strong base in a part of Nigeria, and from there has proclaimed West Africa as its new province of ISWAP. The probability has become high, therefore, that ISIS might make a junction with a minority pushing for the conquest of the majority in Nigeria, that Nigeria might thus be ravaged by ISIS, that Nigeria might soon be the base from which ISIS will push to conquer West Africa and all of Africa, with the purpose of turning Africa into a mighty base of fundamentalist terror against the rest of the civilized world. But in the spirit of today, in the spirit of never again plunging our country into civil war, we can and we must terminate all this descent towards horrific war. We can and we must speedily move our country into the state of law, the state of mutual respect among our hundreds of peoples, and the state of order and peace in our country. The steps needed to accomplish this new order of existence for our country are obvious. First, the Nigerian ethnic nation that has been threatening other Nigerian ethnic nations, that has been engaging in invasion, destruction, disruption, and barbarous rampages in the homelands of other Nigerian peoples, and that has been mobilizing external forces to assist the conquest, the subjugation, and ethnic cleansing of other Nigerian ethnic nations, must now immediately stop and renounce this agenda to the satisfaction of all of us in Nigeria. And to the satisfaction of the rest of the civilized world. Secondly, after that agenda has been stopped and renounced by its authors, we Nigerians must restructure our country with the objective of giving our country a true and generally acceptable federal structure under which the different sections of our country will be able to develop their resources for the conquest of poverty in their domains, for the elevation of the quality of life of their citizens, and for their contributions to the overall prosperity of our country, Nigeria. To make restructuring produce a full and abiding good for our country, we must now, for the first time, correct a serious mistake which we have been making from the beginning, especially from the beginning of independent Nigeria. That mistake is that we have been ignoring the fundamental fact that underlies our country. The fundamental fact is that Nigeria is a country of many different nations. That's the truth. And nobody can change that. The fundamental fact is that Nigeria is a country of many different nations. Of nations that are, in some respects, radically different in their cultures, their political traditions, their perceptions of acceptable reality, their expectations, and their desires and goals. Ignoring this fundamental, we have almost continuously let our country wobble and teeter on the brink of violent implosion. And we have continually inflicted serious pains upon ourselves. We fought and ended a civil war, but we have never really moved immeasurably away from the brinks of civil war. We fought and ended a civil war, but we have never really moved measurably away from the brinks of civil war. We have now seen enough to be convinced that we must not continue to ignore the fundamental. The fundamental will not go away. It is we who must harmonize the structure and management of our country to the fundamental. refusing to recognize and harmonize with the fundamental will certainly continue our country's slide towards dissolution. And it might soon complete that process. Consciously recognizing and harmonizing with the fundamental would almost certainly give our country a long and stable lease of life. But that means that if we do agree and choose to continue to live together as one country, then we all sections of our country must together work out, agree upon, and thoroughly respect the agreed conditions and demands of our living together as one country. We must now absolutely and without further delay address our fundamental and let our country, our nations, and our people have peace. The mounting mood of our younger generations and our youth in this country, the overwhelming and most heavily distressed majority of our country's population, is definitely and increasingly impatiently demanding this. We are already in a crisis. If we, in our sober deference to reality, find that we can no longer hold together as one country, then let us together peacefully find a rational solution. And let us never again plunge into any kind of war among us. It is subhuman to continue to suffer pain and brutalization without trying to get rid of it. And it is insanity to keep doing a thing like the same way over and over, and yet expect a different outcome. I am confident that we Nigerians can make a success of doing the desperately needful now. And I wish our many peoples and our large number of citizens the best. I thank you all.
Those points are compelling enough to deserve the kind of applause it got. Let's do another one for him. Thank you. Professor Banji Akintoye has never been known to shift grounds. Each time he mounts the rostrum to speak about this, the things that matter to all of us. Your hands together for him again. Thank you. Now, my sister here, I didn't tell you that she's also an on-air personality in Solid FM, created by the late Professor Dora Akunyili. Another great Amazon that we're missing today. But thank you very much, my wonderful sister here, former Melody Ajumobi. Please, it's your stage again. Let's have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my very senior colleague. All right, we are moving very well. At this time, we will welcome another very important address coming from a very important personality who also believes in this cause. And I am talking about our very own, who has made us very proud internationally, Professor Wole Soyinka. A round of applause as he comes up to make his presentation. A man you would always want to listen to, a great poet, an author, speaker, very unique, even in his hair. We're glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Please. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my very good friends. fellow survivors of the nation called Nigeria. Two quick remarks before I read my prepared speech. There are many ways of saying never again, and some of them direct, some of them not so direct. Among the indirect ones, for instance, I would count an exercise that we had many years ago entitled PRONACO, which is one of the efforts made to try and suggest protocols of association which would prevent the kind of tragedy that we have witnessed before. I remember among the participants was a young man, very young man. At the time, his name was Agbajalingo. I've always asked myself, was he the one who was kidnapped recently by the police? Yes. And nobody seems to know his whereabouts up till now. You know, civil society tires very quickly here. Once we managed to get Showore out of the clutches of some mad dogs, people promptly forgot Agbajalingo. So let me use this podium to ask, to call on the security forces and to produce him. Let's know exactly where he is, since they kidnapped him in Lagos. The second remark is a more cheerful one, and that is to say, to thank a number of public-spirited humanity considering governors in this nation who finally responded to the demands, the yearning of their citizens, and launched an organization called Amotekun. It counts as one of the most unexpected, because I had given up on them, unexpected but at the same time most desirable New Year present I think this nation has ever received. Amotekun. Those who disagree are free to disagree. The point is, the yearning of the people has been fulfilled with that organization. So now to the burden of my main contribution. Last year, October, I think it's on the 8th, not long after this nation space celebrated one of its Independence Day anniversaries, I found myself in Athens attending the Athens Democracy Forum. You know Athens, of course, claims to be the mother of democracy. I am not here to dispute that with them. You know. What matters is that the world considers that concept sufficiently important to note, and more people are recognizing the fact that one of the ways to say never again is to enthrone the principle of democracy. 2 weeks after that conference, I was in Dar es Salaam. This was, the venue was the university, and the conference was organized by the African Association of the International Organization on African Philosophy, collection of thinkers who'd come through the crucible, as the rest of us have done. And of course, when a bunch of philosophers are gathered together, they're looking for wisdom. They're in search. The quest is wisdom. And today, what we are also in search of is wisdom. And so the burden of my remarks will be drawn from the remarks which I made in Athens, as well as in Dar es Salaam. It is, as I said, a very fortuitous timing, this conference, even though the circumstances historically were tragic. And the claim of the fortuitousness and the importance of this conference, this gathering, is summed up in those two words, never again. Most of us have had occasion to resort to that expression, either in profound causes or even mundane, quite ordinary circumstances. For instance, if we find that we have overspent our budget in a foolhardy moment, when reality dawns and the bank statement comes in, say to ourselves, never again. And even for some breed of people who have experienced for the first time a hangover in the morning after excess the night before, after sobriety and a couple of aspirins have set in, we shake our heads and we say, never again. The trouble, of course, with these examples, both serious and ordinary, is that humanity tends to forget such lessons too soon. And will be found pursuing the same course of action again, all over again and again. We have become inured to what we consider our capacity for recovery, even boast of our increasing resistance to the effects of the night before. However, we do know, objectively, that side by side with that seeming capacity for recuperation, there is a steady erosion of the physical constitution that comes from excess. Sooner or later, the liver, among other vital organs, will register its protest. That latter analogy is quite deliberate. It is evoked to bolster those anxious voices that warn from time to time that no nation has ever survived 2 civil wars. Now, that claim may not be historically sustainable. Fortunately, we have a historian here. But it belongs, true or not, to that category of quest that I have referred to as the pursuit, the quest for wisdom. In this case, of course, let us equate it with the wisdom of not holding a banknote, for instance, over a flame simply because the Central Bank of Nigeria says they produced a currency which is non-flammable, or even the wisdom of not holding an exposed electric wire in one's hand simply because we know that NEPA never supplies electricity. It might just provide that incinerating charge. So even the capacity to be resilient is not an excuse, not a justification for tempting fate. That is a summary of that expression. And that introduces me conveniently to the second conference I referred to in Tanzania, where my contribution was entitled, When is a Nation? With the subtitle, Power, Volition, and History's Reprimand. I believe you have begun to grasp the connection of those 2 conferences with this, but if not, let me remind you that Tanzania was one of the nations that recognized the breakaway republic of Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War. And so finding myself in that setting among products of this special historic formation, pre- and immediate post-colonial African order, despite variations, it was an opportunity to interrogate what, if any, could be considered a philosophical or ideological extract from that human event that consumed, it is estimated, 2.5 million lives within 2 years. One of the preoccupations of philosophy, of course, is to immerse its processes in what actually makes humanity tick. So there we were in Tanzania, a crucial player in the Nigerian, note, I do not say Biafran, but Nigerian tragedy. Regarded, as a progressive nation, with a track record of support for liberation causes, both within the continent and outside, such as the Palestinian struggle, for instance, for nationhood, serving, as she did, as a frontline buffer against apartheid South Africa, and thus incurring punitive attacks from that racist enclave, Tanzania nonetheless chose to go against the tide of opinion within the then Organization of African Unity. She recognized a secessionist state at a time when such a position was not only unfashionable, but was even regarded by many as an act of race treachery, a rupture of the not for discourse, not for consideration, political absolute named African unity. Yes, indeed, that was the conjure word at the time. Unity, African unity, national unity, any unity at any cost. Unity as in non-fragmentation, non-divisible. It was a proposition of transcendentalism and absolute. So there was a modern continent, offspring of multiple rapes, of indecipherable trading treaties, and externally imposed distribution lines. This nation, among others, the continent itself, was to be weaned on the milk of a foster mother named African unity. So let us consider the implications of that collective position. In objective terms, what exactly was it? A historic irony, I propose. We're introducing here a very plain issue that goes to the heart of nation coming and being of any people. That issue being a polarity between volition and dictation. Perhaps you will now admit the relevance of my commencing reference. Huge. No, the problem lies at the base, not is democracy itself not vitiated, not rendered a sham, which I refer. An irony that commenced when the Organization of African Unity adopted the very protocol on non-inviolability of boundaries. That is, the sacrosanctity of given boundaries. And the members of the continent swore to defend those to the last drop of our blood. It's my I know I shall open the pages of the newspaper. Readily oral in millions into a comfort zone, simply from the unknown of the beautiful, from the sound, for the content. Absolutes, however, remain what they are, glorified sound bites, such as sovereignty of this nation is not. What exactly does that mean? It means what it meant for the first comers helm of affairs in the Organization of African Unity. It meant for them to each his own as exists moment of history. It meant of leaders exactly as they are, by respecting one another of our own kind. Anytime that leadership, on whichever side, is about to repeat, yet again, the ultimate folly of sacrificing 2.5 million lives on the altar of absolutes, any absolute whatsoever, we should borrow that African-American credo, paint them on prayer scrolls, flood the skies in their millions with kites bearing that inscription, but very simply, African lives
Just before we sit down, let's make it a special remembrance of the lives we lost. 2 million lives lost. Reverence
does humanity a great favor. Allied to this is the managing of the cessation of hostilities, which determine how people heal and whether it is easy to capitalize on old wounds or not. Few doubt that the nature of the peace treaty, and Professor Anya spoke to this, that concluded World War I, the punitive demands on the Germans were not responsible for the emergence of a charlatan who swept the anger of the German people in Adolf Hitler and gave the world an even more horrible war. How we end wars matter. War creates a psychosis, and it can affect culture in a way that people may not even begin to think about, but is real. I'll give you a funny example I always like to refer to. Most people who are old enough will know that the stereotype of the Igbo man before the war was of a very modest person, of a man who wears a short knicker, his singlet, and his bathroom slippers, walking around the market, and then a car knocks him down, and you discover that he has £1 million under his pillow. That was the Igbo man before the war. The post-war Igbo man is one who is voluble, very, very showy. Obugozuna high sea. How did we go from that image of the Igbo man to this image of the Igbo man? The psychosis and the realities of how war affects people. I have many theories on this, but this is not the day or the time for it. We also need to reflect to determine why war has brought scientific and allied commercial material progress to many societies because of the scientific gains of war. We saw how the Americans appropriated German scientists and German science after the war, in addition to its own, to lead to America's post-war commercial expansion. But we look at Nigeria and see how little we gained from the science of our civil war, and we've got to ask ourselves questions. These are the kinds of matters that we should be interrogating. I say frequently that the most primitive public sphere is one which, instead of focusing on issues, focuses on ad hominem trading of insults, something that has continued, unfortunately, to dominate our space. But I think that we have to face the reality that one of the lessons that we do not seem to have learned from the war is how to manage public conversation. If you go on social media today, you will know that Nigeria is at war. I mean, young people who were not anywhere around the war hate so much, and you wonder why. And any measure of value in me, it is something, a sense of what I consider is my power, and this, many of it comes from people not having the capacity to have rational conversation. Because they can't discuss rationally, they don't have the information, the education is so poor that they can't take on the issues, they choose to insult. So we must begin to educate our people better. And that can elevate the public space. Now let me turn to a really emotive thing. What genocide is a coinage of the 20th century. In fact, it entered the lexicon, our lexicon, from reflections on the Armenian experience in Central Europe, Turkey and such places. But the Nigerian Civil War did produce perhaps the second worst genocide in numbers of the whole 20th century, which was a century of genocides. Now, I will tell you an embarrassing personal thing for how I engaged this subject. Embarrassing because it is completely out of line from the Biafra experience. In 1996, I was writing a book titled Managing Uncertainty, Competition and Strategy in Emerging Economies. Took a sabbatical leave, spent it at the Harvard Business School working on this book. The more I looked at the environment of business, the more I realized that the government was the most dangerous object in the environment of business. Businesses failed more because of government in Nigeria than any other cause. In fact, the model that I offered from structural economics, the so-called structure, conduct, performance paradigm. And I took one that is famous, the one offered by the Harvard Business School professor, Michael Porter. And I said, if you played this as a basis for determining outcomes, performance outcomes in Nigeria, you would completely be lost, because the night before something, one minister speaking to one guy on the tennis court can make a decision that completely blows your investments. So the model I created, which was called the 3E framework, had as the overhang what I call the predatory acts of public officials. So I thought to myself, there's so much poverty in Africa. So many people are dying because the environment of business is unfavorable, is not enabling. There must be something that is done. But in African countries, governments or people in power are so powerful that nobody really begins to engage these things. What normally checks these things? Human nature is that way. Strong institutions. But how do you build strong institutions? Incidentally, I had just met Douglas North, who won the Nobel Prize from his work on institutions, institutional change, and economic performance. And I thought to myself, African countries need supranational institutions above the country that can help reduce some of the challenges of the environment. And so I began a campaign for international criminal courts to try African leaders for impoverishing their people by the kind of economic policies they offered, and for carrying out acts of genocide. And then I found there was an international movement already, so I joined in. And so I was going from newspaper to newspaper, making presentations as to why this kind of law needed to be supported in the United States. When I arrived to go to school in the United States in 1978, I met the Africa editor of the Christian Science Monitor, a guy called David Annabelle. And from our conversations, he encouraged me to contribute to the newspapers. Just a sense of irony. When the first day I met Dele Giwa, he said to me, "Oh, I read your piece in the Christian Science Monitor about Ojukwu's return to Nigeria." I just located in the irony of our conversation today. So I wrote to the Monitor editors. I wanted to come and make a presentation on the idea of an international criminal court. And when I came there one very cold morning in January of 1997, after my presentation, the editors of the Christian Monitor said to me, "Look, I was too idealistic, that this would never happen. International criminal court for economic crimes, for genocide, it will never happen." Less than 18 months later, in July, I think, or June of the following year, the Rome Statutes were passed that brought this International Criminal Court in The Hague. But what was interesting for me was that in carrying that campaign, I actually did not think of what I experienced in Biafra. I was thinking about economic genocide that were being carried out by people who, because of corruption and their other self-interests, were diminishing their people, destroying the dignity of the human person across the continent. Having faced this reality that I was onto something much bigger than I should have been thinking of when the Statute of Rome passed, I began to reflect on my own Civil War experience. How did my Civil War experience begin? And by the way, part of the reasons that I gave, rationalizing after the fact now, that I didn't think of the Civil War, was that a movement was taking place in international political arena. The kind of state that Professor Soyinka described, that African leaders held on to, is an evolution from the end of the 100 years religious wars in Europe that led to the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Now, the Peace of Westphalia, which created the modern nation state of the Jews, fundamental human rights became central. The declaration by the United Nations began a new movement. It was only in Nigeria, because the self-determination as one another and built proper. So how did my Civil War story begin? It's a very intimate, personal story. I told a bit of it on television last night. I was returning to, my father worked for British Petroleum. It's a town in current capital of Zamfara State. Had a tank farm, Guzo. My father worked there, and I was returning to Guzo by train, arriving one Sunday morning, the last Sunday in May of 1966. As the train pulled in, station was completely deserted, nobody in sight. I thought, this is strange, it's not, I got out of the train. Across the road, I could see my father's blue Peugeot 404. And then I looked closely, away from the car, somewhere by the corner was my father. He was carrying a double-barrel gun. And he had this bullet. I said, if I had seen Rambo then, I would think he was playing Rambo. But I thought he was going hunting. I wondered why he was going hunting that early in the morning on a Sunday. And anyway, he waved me across, and I got in the car, and he drove off. And he started telling me what happened. Earlier that morning, riots had started. My mother and my siblings were in church, Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church in Guzo. Rioters had invaded the church. My mother's arm had been broken. The hospitals were too dangerous to have anybody. And so they'd taken the family to the home of a family friend who was the manager for the Barclays Bank there at the time. His name is Garba Wushishi. He would become Minister of Information under Shagari. So in Garba Wushishi's place, there was cover, doctors came to treat my mother and all of that. And it got worse. Okonkwo Ofiadiulu. His father was the leader of the Igbo community in Guzo. Dambeki, he was killed that night. No, the next night, when everything escalated. Dambeki. And so we all ran to the airport. My father made contacts, and BP sent a light aircraft to come and take us out, like a 10-seater aircraft. So when the aircraft came in and we were leaving, you can imagine hundreds of people desperate to leave, and this one family was going. People were running after the aeroplane as we went to take off. That was my first vivid image of the nature of that kind of crisis. Anyway, on the theater. A few weeks before, soldiers entered Asaba, and people were being killed for exercise. And the people of Asaba got together and said, okay, let's show that we are warmly welcoming the troops. So in their otogu, in their finest whites, they came out to dance to welcome the troops. And the women were ordered to this side. The men were ordered to this side, and they opened fire on the men. A friend of mine survived that. Thousands were killed. A friend of mine survived that by playing dead under the weight of the body of his father and his brother. He was lying underneath there. Now, these stories are not meant to make anybody get upset, but to say that if you don't deal with those kinds of things. In a chat with General Gowan, I speak very frequently with General Gowan. He was in Asaba a few weeks ago, and the issue was raised again. It was the third time I was in Asaba that this issue was raised. And General Gowan, I don't know if he would like me to say this publicly, but anyway, maybe I shouldn't. He really did not know what happened in Asaba. He didn't. You know, anyhow, so when I crossed to that side, that had just happened. And at this time, my people were all living inside the bush. Nobody lived in the town. And my grandfather chose not to run into the bush. World War II veteran in his 70s, what was he running from? And one young soldier saw him in front of him. I said, "What are you doing there?" I said, "What can I be doing here?" And I used him for target practice. And his body was left in front of his front porch. Interesting thing that as we were coming out of the bush, we were, quote unquote, captured by some soldiers. And again, men to this side, women to this side. Then another group of federal soldiers arrived and said to the ones that had captured us, "What are you trying to do?" And they started fighting. I want to show that the human conscience, at some points, things begin to separate. And anyhow, we ended up in St. Patrick's College, Asaba, as refugees. As it turned out, the battalion commander, Nathaniel Nasamu, Lieutenant Colonel, was a friend of my father's. A couple of weeks later, I was in Lagos. My father was in Lagos, actually, during all that time. And my civil war ended. But this is an interesting part. I tell this story because I want to raise this part. After I got to Lagos, life was so good. We were partying. James Brown was happening. You were really happy in the neighborhood if you could show that you had Papa's got a brand new bag or whatever it was. We did not know that a war was going on just a couple of 100 meters down the road. That is the feeling that I have when I see people talking about the Northeast today in Lagos. There are some Nigerians killing each other somewhere in the Northeast. Human solidarity and our shared humanity is the most valuable asset that man possesses. And to lose it is to lose everything. And so that Civil War experience leads me to ask myself repeatedly, why did we not do enough to learn from it? But more importantly, leads me to a big question to ask myself, why do I never feel bitter about the Civil War? I've never felt bitter. I'm not sure, I can say this as a boast. It's hard to find many Nigerians who are more Nigerian than myself. So why don't I feel any bitterness? I've struggled to try and explain it, but I think I can provide a couple of explanations. First of all, General Gowan's leadership after the war was very, very important. General Gowan, truly in his heart, believed there was no victor, no vanquished. But whether the implementation of the policies led to that happening is another matter. But those kinds of efforts, when you then top it up with the Shagari disposition, picking somebody from that part of the country to be his vice president. And then I somehow got lucky, young fellow coming back from grad school, thinking he could change the world. And then I get identified by that vice president. And one day he says to me, President Shagari, yesterday approved for you to replace Professor Ndigbo. And I said, what does that mean? And I end up in government. And from my office in Dodam Barracks, most of us don't remember, but President Shagari was a chain smoker, but he never smoked in public. And he respected the office of the president so much that he never smoked inside that office either. So to smoke, President Shagari would come out to smoke. And I would come out, and Abadabo and I will corner him and start chatting him up. And I saw a true nationalist in that man, that history and the newspapers probably will not capture enough. Had the Shagari mindset resulted in an Ekweme presidency in 1987, the ghost of Biafra would have been buried permanently. But that was aborted in 1983. However, just to summarize my thoughts, I was making the point that the trust between stakeholder groups, including those who govern and those who are governed, making a point about that, noted here the problem of a very cynical youth could be managed if we educate people properly. But we don't teach history in our schools. How do we change that? I think that a great part of this problem has been a matter of leadership failure. I recall being interviewed 2 days after the coup d'etat of December 31st, 1983, by the New York Times correspondent Clifford May III. In that interview, I said that those who threw out the Shagari government may discover one day that they may have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think anybody's in doubt that the Nigerian government has gotten worse progressively since then. There's also the point that comes from the Balkans. Whereas in the Balkans, hatreds from communal feuds can go on for 1,000 years with vendettas, civil wars, generation after another. Many in Nigeria quickly forgot the horrors of the civil war because of the conduct of men like General Gowon and men like Alhaji Shehu Shagari. Are we going to be able to redeem our future, to draw from what we lost? And I'll move towards the close now. Lessons from 50 years after Biafra for the new Nigeria. The critical question is, why does Nigeria wobble so badly in spite of experience that should be driving it forward, and what can be done about it? I think we can list reasons to include: 1, a mistaken view that Nigeria is about how much you can extract from the national cake. A cake to eat makes poor tomorrow, but producing makes rich always. Check the example of Spain in history. Spain thrived as the conquistadors brought back hordes of gold from Latin America and elsewhere. But today, Spain is one of the poorest countries in Europe. And countries that were not anywhere near as endowed as Spain have much higher quality of life. Nigeria has refused to become a producing country because it has an elite that is steeped in extracting rent and in getting a share of the booty. And so we're not creating wealth as a country. And we're not educating our children, investing enough in them to lead to further creation of wealth. Merit matters. Nigeria's essence, sadly, has become about the democratization of mediocrity. Affirmative action that some are educationally backward has been abused for excessive cronyism, which has devalued Nigerian institutions. I can give you a capable Nigerian from any part of Nigeria, but those who live in the excuse that some places are less endowed from a human point of view use it to bring cronies that are thoroughly, totally, completely incompetent to head positions in our country, devaluing our institutions and making progress difficult. The collapse of culture, which has reduced human purpose to primitive accumulation of power and money, and often a criminal privatization of the Commonwealth. 4, the loss of a sense of principle of subsidiarity, that government and authority be decentralized and move to levels closest to the people. A distant government in some far-off place like Abuja, Alausa, or Enugu creates a moral distance in civic culture, which Peter Eke captures well in the essence of his essay, The Two Publics. The overburdening of people by an expensive and pompous government. Governments need to be cheaper, simpler, more ethical, and more sensitive to extant circumstances. Governments in Nigeria are too big, protocol, too unbelievable, and it seems like that we are creating a government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians, rather than a government of the people, for the people. Thinking, learning, and projecting and planning state is imperative, and the ground norm needs to be rewritten. The political party system is totally flawed and a complete failure. Nigeria cannot make progress with the kind of political parties that we have today. So to conclude, if the ghost of Biafra is not to return, and does not have to come from the southeast, some books, I saw Chido this morning, some books, titles are telling here. Chido Onumas tells us we are all Biafrans now. Another tells us that in Biafra, Africa died. If the ghost of Biafra, which can rise from frustrated youth in the southwest, Niger Delta, and several parts of the north, who were first to call for a breakup of Nigeria in those words, Araba, Awari, Bamwaso, Melikin soldier. If those are not to become so spread that Robert Kaplan's fear in the book, The Coming Anarchy, does not become real, there is a duty that each and every one of us has. It is a duty to believe that it can be different, and that if we can dream it, we can make it happen. I thank you.
Compelling speaker, his oratorial power, I don't know if we'll be able to match that all the time, speaking truth to power. Professor Party told me once again, your hands together for him. Thank you. The next thing to do now would be to constitute our panel of discussants. Of course, you know them, Professor Yemasen, Mr. Akin Oshuntoku, and of course, our Amazon of the Tube, broadcaster par excellence, a great singer, Onyeka Owenu. But then that's not, no, my sister will do all of that. But let me also say that because our very good friend, Eyina Abaribe, senator, ranking senator, came all the way from Abuja for this. We'd just like him to have an input quickly. Please come, sir. Your hands together for Senator Eyina Abaribe, Deputy Chief Whip. Oh, did I get it right? That's all right.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I actually came to listen, and I think I'm just being dragged in to do a goodwill message. Let me greet everybody, and on behalf of my good friend, who was supposed to be here, Shehu Sani, who is being held for allegedly collecting money for a case that is not in the Supreme Court, and he was supposed to have collected money on behalf of the Chief Justice of the Federation. Let me greet all of you and say that just like Pat has said, I was 12 years and had just entered the secondary school. And I had my mother's younger brother, because my grandfather was a polygamist and he had some younger wives, who was living with us, and he was just 15. And we were all living together during the war. And we went into the bush, because at that time there was nothing we were doing except to go to the bush and come out. And as we came out, he was conscripted. His name is Okerenta. His father's name was Okere, so they called him Okerenta. And the last time I saw him, he was marching along with some other people who were also conscripted. And the next thing we heard was that all of them were just carried and taken to Igrita. And they died there without training or anything. A lot of people don't know that war affects everybody. It affects us. And so that's why I came, just to listen and see what I can do when I get back to the Red Chamber, so that when those who sit down there and think that they can tell everybody what they ought to do, I can remind them that war can destroy everything that they think they have. I wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Enyina Baribe, Senate Minority Leader. Thank you very much. My sister, please come. We have the three of them, but there's a strong woman you must introduce to us. I know continually she is an inspiration to not just the women, even us who were colleagues of hers in broadcasting. But as I said, music has taken this woman over. We'll get her back.
Thank you very much, sir. That's really good to know that she was a seasoned broadcaster as well. So I'm also allowed to pursue my yearnings for music and in that area as well. I already have a mentor, a very good mentor all the way. Please, ladies and gentlemen, very distinguished guests, can we a round of applause, give a round of applause for our very own Onyeka Onwenu, very, very legendary in her own field and mark. Very good to have you. We're having the panel session, and it will be coordinated by Chido Onuma. He's here and very ready, I am very sure. So please kindly come up stage and have your seat as well as you coordinate this session. This session will be about 50 minutes for the discussion, and then 30 minutes will be given for an interactive session where we have questions and answers addressed by the panelists. We truly appreciate your presence.
I haven't seen Chido. He has a way, he's very different. He has his white hair all over the place, and
no more hair, just a beard.
Oh, a beard? It's not the same one. Anyway, my sister here has a catch. I was going to say has a catch to flight, a flight to catch.
You see that Chido behind you?
Oh, that's you. The moderator, please come. You're opening, and then our sister says she has a flight to catch, please. Thank you. Quick.
All right. Well, good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. My name is Chido Onuma. I'm the coordinator of the African Center for media and information literacy, and the author of the book that Professor Patu Tomi mentioned, We Are All Biafrans. Quickly, we've spent so much time, we ought to have started at 10. It's almost to 2 now. So I'll just go straight to, we all listened to the address by the keynote speakers, Professor Patu Tomi and Professor Wale Soyinka. Just quickly, a paragraph from my own research and writing about Biafra. And I think Professor Soyinka's speech captured the essence of why we are here today. When we hear people talk about Nigeria, what we usually hear is that it can't happen here. We have this capacity as a very resilient people. As Professor Soyinka said, the capacity to be resilient is not a license to tempt fate. I think we've tempted fate enough in this country, and it's time we brought it to an end. There are those for whom the civil war hasn't ended. They feel they haven't really exalted the pound of flesh for those who dared to challenge the so-called non-negotiability of Nigeria. But 50 years after the Biafra-Nigeria war, I feel it's time to end the war. And it's not just to end the war against Biafra, and that's why the title of my book is We Are All Biafran, but to end the war against millions of our countrymen and women who have been duped and dispossessed. Having said that, I'll quickly, they say women first, so I'll quickly go to Amazon, the great Onyeka, when you have 5 minutes to give us your perspective on both the presentations by the keynote speakers, but also your thoughts on the Civil War 50 years after.
Thank you very much. I've got 5 minutes. Lovely. It's a great privilege to be here with you today to talk about a subject matter that is very close to our hearts, that is very personal to many of us, very sensitive matter, a very painful matter indeed. And yes, some of us have lived with some bitterness, and we make no apologies about that. We were a people in war, led into war not by our own wishes or design, but in self-defense. No apologies, Nigeria. No apologies to the world. But here we are. I'm sorry, I'm going to stand up, if you don't mind. My name is Onyeka Onwenu, and it's not the Onyeka Onwenu that you think you know, that you read about in the papers, but the Onyeka Onwenu that was born and raised in Port Harcourt. That's correct. And the person who made that statement knows. When he says DK Onwenu, he's telling you where this person came from. My father was the first Ndigbo man in the Federal House, and he was representing a Port Harcourt constituency. He was the principal of Enitonia High School. He was a brilliant man, but he died too early. Thank you. That's my background. I'm also from Abia State. Since I am Adamazi, I'm Mwaro. Tuonuma Adamazi. I'm from Imo State, Ndigbo, and I'm from Anambra, where my mother comes from. I can go there and live. I can do anything I want in Anambra. Nobody can say anything to me. I'm also from Lagos State. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, I'm from Lagos State. I married a Yoruba man. I have 2 Yoruba children. They only paid 5,000 naira as bride price. So we have a right to demand more money anytime. 5 minutes going. Yes, 50 years after I fought the war. As a young girl, 14, 15, 16, 17, I was in that war. And I lost many relatives. I worked in hospitals. I carried babies who died in my arms. I treated old people who took days to die. People were dying out of hunger. Even our soldiers were dying out of hunger at a particular point. But thank God, we survived. You see, when my father died at 40, he was a politician and also a principal, but he didn't have much money. In those days, you had to keep your day job, even if you were a member of the House of Representatives. Yes, my mother, an Anambra woman, was a trader. Put your hands together for Anambra women. She was richer than my dad, so my dad would borrow money from her to buy the land, and he never paid back. You know how it is. And my mother dares not raise the subject again. At the end of the war, I could not go back to Port Harcourt. My home was abandoned property. Those of you who come from Port Harcourt know the story. A home that a widow, my father had just laid the foundation when he died in a motor car accident, on duty. A building that a widow, and living just adjacent to us, the Ikokus on Hospital Road, we could see you, we could relate. In fact, I thought we were related because every family in Port Harcourt was together. You didn't care where they came from or who they were. Once you're from Port Harcourt, every parent had the right to reprimand another child that you saw misbehaving. It was a beautiful town, but we couldn't get back to it. So for me, the Civil War never ended. At the end of that war, my family, oh no, it never ended. It's still going on. I had no family house. My poor mother went back to claim the property she was beating into a coma by people whom she had helped all her life and sent to school because she's an Igbo woman and now Port Harcourt belonged to another group of people. They forgot the sacrifices that the Igbos made. It's still going on. No apology has ever been made about that. The road that is now referred to Harold Wilson Drive used to be DK Owenu Road because of the sacrifice that people like the Owenus, the Ikokus, what you know them, the sacrifices they made in building up Port Harcourt. Here I am. So I traveled outside thanks to my sister who was at Harvard at the time, who organized for the rest of us to come and go to school. But we all came back to do what? To develop Nigeria. I have tried, with the little talent that God has given me, to use it for the betterment of my society and my country. But can I tell you something? That if I were a Yoruba or Hausa woman, I would probably have had more patronage, I would have had more help and more support than I have got by my self-help effort to raise this country up. But I'm not asking anybody for anything. I put myself through school. My widowed mother did her best, but I was working 2 jobs in America to put myself through school. I didn't want to take Nigerian scholarship because they were giving it to everybody, those who deserved it and those who didn't. And many of them were not even in school. I put myself through school. Wellesley College and the New School for Social Research. I have no apologies to make to anybody. I am angry. I am angry at Nigeria. I am angry at this government which seems to be letting us down. I am angry at us as a people. I am angry at my people Ndigbo. Because if they have refused you, why are you refusing yourself? Stop complaining and do it for yourself. We've always been able to do that. How did we build Imo Airport? Nobody built it. We spent how many years raising money? I know it was my equipment that was traveling all over the country for concerts. I gave free concerts to build Imo Airport. That's who we have been. And I remember in those days, Ekurana, Igbo State Union, Kurana, Zetsiobi, Dike Onwenofa, Oputa, Ikoku, you name them, Abakorana, that's it. No dispute. Everybody follows the line and gets done what needs to be done. Let me tell you about Ndigbo. Ndigbo are wonderful people. Let me tell you about Ndigbo. Ndigbo are resilient. Let me tell you about Ndigbo. Ndigbo are people with integrity, with conscience, with a feeling of humanity that they can reach out wherever they are and contribute something to that society and not care that they're not even from there. That's who we are. Do not categorize us as people who are uncouth. We don't know, we don't have unity amongst ourselves. You're kidding yourself. We love ourselves. but we also love our neighbors. You see, to love your neighbor, you have got to love yourself. That's what the good book says. Love your neighbor as yourself. So how are you going to love your neighbor if you don't know anything about self-love? I am a proud Igbo woman. And yes, if there's anything you know about me, as I walk into a place, know that there's nothing you can do to me in this country to bow my head. I will not do it. I am my father's daughter. I am my mother's daughter. As an Igbo person, I stand before you committed to the project called Nigeria. But at the same time, you talk about never again. With what is happening now, never again? I don't know. But I will soon take my seat. Let me say to the rest of Nigeria, you insult us, and sometimes we do the insulting as well, and that's terrible. We've come to a stage where we have to be insulting each other so badly. But go ahead. We will not succumb. We will not bow. We are children of God. We are here for a purpose. God has put us on this good earth for that purpose. You cannot drive us to the sea. You cannot tell us to shut up and take the pain that you are inflicting on us, abuse us on top of it. Listen, if you don't want us, then let us go. Thank you very much.
Never seen Onyeka in this form before.
Thank you very much. Now, we get to hear from Professor Yimatsen. Please. Okay. Yes. Sir.
Distinguished Nigerians. Oh, okay. I want to start my contribution by protesting the sitting arrangements. I want it to be, if possible, that it should be restructured. How can the big resource person sit down like school children, and we, the panelists who are just the addendum to them, sit so comfortably? I don't feel comfortable here, sitting that way. Just look at the difference. So please, will you deduct that from my time?
Okay.
Look, I have gone through so many mood changes this afternoon. I didn't know that I was going to have this kind of experience. I never knew that as a 16-year-old young man in Boko at the beginning of the Civil War, that I would come to this gathering 50 years later to come and discuss the Civil War. Because there was a war outside the Biafran enclave. And whoever went and created that problem for Nigeria at that time, please, next time you do it, go to Cameroon and find your fighters. Because my T people are not going to provide any fighters for anybody again. %60% of the fighting forces in Biafra will come from. Why did you do that? Why? So I sit down here, I'm thinking like a team man, I'm thinking like a Yoruba man, because I took my degree and street one to do my youth corps. Before I came to the University of Lagos, I was at Nzuko. I refused to apply to go to the Ahmadu Bello University for my undergraduate education. At that time, there were 5 universities in Nigeria: ABU, Ife, Lagos, Ibadan, and Nzuko. I attended the University of Lagos from Boko. So I sit down here, I'm no longer a team man, I'm a nationalist in Nigeria. It is inevitable, my upbringing. Also, my father was a member of parliament, those ones who were removed in 1966 by that coup that some people say precipitated the Civil War. My family suffered from it. Because that member of parliament, who was a big man, and I was the big man's child, was reduced to nothing after that coup. And which party did he belong to? United Middle Belt Congress. Well, there are political historians here, so I'm not going to delve into that aspect of our history. You know what the UMBC stood for? It stood for restructuring of Nigeria. That's what it stood for. So I'm here. I'm speaking as maybe an intellectual. I know what is happening in the 19 northern states. I know what is going on there. And I have very good memories. Also, when I saw Professor Obios, I was very excited. Because from what Padutomi was saying, we were in that Shagari presidency together. And we were very serious about building a Nigerian nation after that civil war. We're not joking. Sir, am I lying? We were together. Yes. Yes. I was very hot-headed. I just came in from California, from interacting with the Black Panthers and those kinds of people. So I don't know whether my head has cooled a bit now. But I have had an experience. Maybe the United Nations system managed to calm me down with this concept about love, where if it doesn't exist, you cannot have the humanism or humanity that Professor Wolingshaw Indeke talked about. If you don't have that love, you don't love yourself and your neighbor, you cannot have humanism. You don't appreciate the value of humanism. And people are training dogs and cats to love. So why can't humans also learn love? What is this powerful writer, Chinwezu? He talked about how the white man loves his cats and dogs more than the black person in his book, The West and the Rest of Us. So, look, we're here today because we want to end this Biafran war. If it never ended, we must end it. Professor Bias, I must commend you for the communique of the Igbo World Forum, which you issued last month. That was, look, let me tell you how it resonated in the North. In fact, in my community, they say, wow, this is very important. This is a very important document. And Yima, if you go to Lagos, please go and make sure that you continue from where that communique ended. If the Rwandans have learned a lesson from their experience, when I went to work in Nairobi for the United Nations, my first set of friends were Rwandese, in fact, Tutsi. They were refugees in Kenya. I came back to Nigeria, and within 15 years, Rwanda has moved from where we have not done in 60 years this year to almost become a Switzerland in Africa. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? What nonsense is this? We have the human resources in this country that other people envy worldwide. And let me tell you also that it is no longer the preserve of any part of this country. I teach mainly, about 70% of my students at Bayes University in Abuja are northern students, 70%. Out of that 70%, well, there's another 70% Hausa, Fulani, Kanuri, Shiwa Arab girls who are hungry for knowledge. 774 local governments in this country, each local government today has the capacity to produce a Nobel laureate. I'm telling you as a teacher because we teach them. Each local government in those 774 can produce an IT expert, can produce a neurosurgeon, can produce whatever you want to produce. In my locality, 2 of my classmates, one of them is a nuclear scientist. And we're bush people in Benue. I never saw the coast until I came to the University of Lagos. Never saw the coast, this coast. One of them is a nuclear scientist. He has retired now from the International Atomic Energy Agency. In that same class, one of my classmates went to Germany to study how to manufacture the engines of cars. He came back to work for Steyr in Bauchi before he died. Look, we are our own enemies. And somebody talked about the role of politicians and the failure of a kind of politics. We're dealing here with 2 major questions. The national question we can deal with, that's why we're here. We also need to deal with that leadership question, Professor Otomi. you and I will have that responsibility. Professor Obiaza, we have experience as intellectuals in governance. You're not really a politician. Not really, no. Neither are you. Neither am I. But we have worked closely with politicians, so we understand them. We know the damage they do to us. Clarake told us about this in his book, How Politics and the Developed Africa. One of the best essays on that topic. We know it. So, we can do something about these two questions. The national question, which is that we must respect ourselves on the basis of fairness, equity, and justice. These are not negotiable. I can tell you that, look, my experience is rather unique, and I wonder why God has done that to me. Bishop, I don't know, maybe you interpret that for me later, but why did this young man, I have been a chief community leader. I've been a national leader. I was the first Secretary General of the Campaign for Democracy here in Lagos. National. Professor Shoyinka was talking about civil society. That was one of the most powerful civil society organizations that helped the military to go away. I was the founding Secretary General of that organization. I was the founding Secretary General of the Middle Belt Forum, taking over from where my father stopped. And now I have also worked within the northern groups. Let me tell you, I understand what is going on in that place. If I tell you I don't, I'm lying. I know the mentality of a Fulani man. I know. Those who are pacifists and those who are jihadists and those who are this and that, I know.
Prof, could you round up, please?
Sorry, you should give him more time, because this, in the course of nation building, you can't truncate. This is not a.
People will ask questions.
I came from Abuja yesterday for this purpose, and I must discharge. I'll have to democratically ask the audience to appeal to you to give me more time.
He said, "Don't truncate nation building process."
Look, this gathering is a divine arrangement. Don't joke with it. Where are you going to find the Nigerians who would discuss these issues? So when you come to Abuja, you led the delegation of Southerners to meet with the Northerners. Who led the Northern team? I'm sure you were surprised to see this team man leading the Northern team to discuss with you. How did that meeting end, sir?
We decided to create a Nigerian Elders Forum.
When we came to that meeting, everybody was frowning, and I laughed. I said, what are we frowning over? Because of some national issues? Because of policy questions? Because of a discussion of how we should live together? That's why everybody is frowning. I laughed. I said, I'm going to neutralize this nonsense today. Didn't we, sir? Didn't we do that, sir?
We were friends and brothers at the end.
Can that process be sustained? What do we gain from not sustaining that process of love, brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever you call it? What do we gain from that? Did we have any ethnic or religious, well, we're both Christians, we're Christians. Did we have any problems around ethnicity and state origin when we were working together? Our main concern was, where do we take this estate of the black people, which is the most important? What did we take it to? When you were discussing, you didn't want to get me into the picture, but I knew what was going on. When you were trying to arrange for Ojuku's return, they said, well, this young man, we don't know him, but we don't know what he's doing, so let me handle this, the two of you. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we thank God for this gathering. Let us end that civil war today. Look, when I saw that communique, and I shared it with a lot of my people, I said, look, we have to take that communique very seriously. One of the most important documents that we have seen in recent times. And this gathering here, I'm telling you sincerely that I went through a lot of mood changes. At some point, I felt that tears would come out of my eyes. Because I was in Boko as a young man, I saw how the war gathered. Do you know, we lost almost every Tea family, probably lost somebody in that war. 60% of the fighting forces, community. The question is, for what? For what?
Thank you very much, Prof. Really appreciate your contributions. We'll continue to say...
Prof, God bless you. Thank you very much.
Never again. So, we hear from Mr. Akin Oshutoko, please. You also have 5 minutes.
He wants to be on the podium, actually.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless you.
Good afternoon. I don't have entertainment skills, so I'm more comfortable using a podium, unlike my previous. Okay. Well, I want to start off the way my predecessor started, and that is to point at an area in which this thing could have been improved: gender imbalance. Of all the cast there, you're the only one. But you didn't say anything about it. Oh. Okay. Yeah. See, many problems of this world, in the age of over-communication, can be simplified and addressed if you go back to first principles. And one of those first principles, the most important, is to wake up every day and say that, how can I be a better human being? I don't need to impress you by saying that the Civil War is the central issue of Nigeria's political history. And the attitude of Nigeria to that history, to Biafra, it will indicate the kind of nation that we are, whether we have improved, whether we have become better human beings or worse. I don't know, I'm sure people noted very recently, and it made my heart very glad. Danjuma was actually almost getting apologetic about his role in the Civil War in the recent past, saying that he directed his junior officers not to kill those people. Now, this attitude is drastically different from what it used to be before. It used to be chauvinistic and celebratory about it. But there's nothing to be celebratory about. If anybody is advocating for restitution or remedial action about Biafra, it's not the Southeast you are helping Nigeria. Oh, it is contradictory. It is contradictory to say that, for instance, no matter man or narrative, that the next Nigerian president should come from the Igbo. That is, you are not doing the Igbo a favor. It is Nigeria. How many things does Nigeria have left, right, to enact a sense of nationhood? And as I said, these are the issues that across the Niger, the relationship between the Southeast and Southwest. There is no thread that binds that relationship meaningfully together than the action of one man, and that was Adekunle Fajuyi. It shows you mean of powerful symbols. Right? The defeat of Biafra is not into problems. Everybody can write about the American Civil War today because the issues are clear. You could see the demarcation between right and wrong. And those who prevailed, Abraham Lincoln, you can't do wrong if you are fighting slavery. So it ended on the moral victory for the US, unlike our own. Our own ended on the philosophy of might is right, the law of the jungle. And we can do many things. We can do things about it. We don't need to be apportioning blames when we seek to improve ourselves. Again, let me tell you something that I'm not pandering to you. People seem to miss one very crucial element about the coup of January 15, 1966. There is no way you can have a caste of those coup leaders unless they presume they were acting on behalf of Nigeria, not on behalf of Igbo. It is otherwise illogical. Look at this gathering. Huh? Imagine I get 5 other Yoruba people. I come on stage and I announce something that is as a result of our own conspiracy. The logic collapses from the first. It is illogical. So this idea of saying that Ndigbo was not. It was badly managed. It was a mess, like so many things about Nigeria's history. Professor Patrick told me has mentioned some of those things that will help the process of healing. The greatest statement made by General Yakubu Gowon was what he said about no victor, no vanquished, but they didn't follow through. If he did, we won't have the same. We will not be having this conference. You see, the problem we have with this kind of conference is that we are clapping with one hand. Yeah. So, but as I said, because of my training, I want to look at things less from the perspective of apportioning blames, but every person has the element of good in himself, as well as bad. Professor Tony told us about a Garuba Wishishi, right? Who took them into his house. Otherwise, who knows what will have happened to them. That man is not from the East. There was a Yoruba man who was flogged in Surulere in 1966 at the outbreak of the First World War because he was shielding an Igbo person. All these kind of things, issues, we should look for more of them. You see, Nigeria needs to write its history. And the reason so far you cannot write it is the conflicting perspectives and inability to come with truth. Right. People are running away. So let us, those of us who are so trained, give ourselves that task, of in what ways can we write Nigeria's history as a task. The reason that is militating against it is the Civil War and the perceptions of it. It was not a glorious war. It should be condemned through and through. And I find it difficult, as I said. Look at the series of events from 1966 to 70. There's something insensitive about calling some people rebels. If that history is not the history of rebels or rebellion, not at all. At the other side, look, Sonny Bello was the principal ADC to General Agunyi Ironsi. He was there in Ibadan when he was killed, and he did one thing to the limit of his capability. He was the one who shielded Colonel Ndigbo also to escape. Well, he organized that place where they were in Ibadan. He organized the escape. So there are many of these things that, look, because the military coup in 1996 was an accident, and then you now chose that accident to be the norm on which you erect your house. How would that work? So, but let us also learn to be, the onus is going to be on all of us. And those of us who are getting old and things like that, we have to develop, and who God has provided means of communication with people. We've got to develop skills of tolerance, communication. I have a friend, a big top man, it's an Igbo man. So at the height of during the last election, he sent to me a breakdown of the population ratio of Lagos. He said the Igbo 40%, Yoruba 30%. So I said, look, please, don't send it to any Yoruba man again. You are sending, even if it is true, you are sending it to you know, but that is typical, you know, there's another issue, you know. The last time it came up, it was, I think Chief Jimo Obodo was there. It was about this cross-carpeting thing. My father was one of the 6 that was affected. It is in his autobiography what took place. There was nothing like cross-carpet. My dad contested as an independent candidate from Ekiti, not NCNC. The other 6 contested on the platform of IPP, Ibadan People's Party. So it is, but the significant thing was that despite something that is my own personal history, Chief Umobodo refused to agree. Well, so ladies and gentlemen, I can see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, 50 years after the Civil War, I hope we can say never again. I want to thank the keynote speakers, the panelists. The floor will be open for a few questions. Time is fast spent. I would like us to, what is to be done? You know, unfortunately for us as a people, 50 years after the Civil War, the existential crisis that we had is still with us today. So if we can get some, you know, straight to the point, 4 people, 1 minute each. The lady in, or you want to come up here? The 4 people, okay, you, this, we'll balance it. We have a lady here. Can you come up, please?
Let me tell you why we're begging that you come, so that the cameras can catch you. All the cameras will be backing you if you don't come up. Who's speaking now?
Yeah,
whoever it is should please come. You have to come, so that the camera can catch you, please. No, please. Let's do it that way. There are 5 cameras here, and they're all pointing in this direction. Otherwise, we'll shut them out. It's not right. Madam, quick. May I not?
All the questions?
No, 4.
There are 4.
Yes. All the questions, then the addresses. No, look at this man. I got some room wine.
Okay, thank you very much. My question goes to my queen mother that went straight to the point I wanted to hear.
I'm sorry.
She went straight to the point by asking, and because she talked about properties that were abandoned in Port Harcourt. And we are talking about never again, and also a lasting solution to heal the wounds. And this wound is still there, because when you think about what she said here, it's a very touchy one. I want to ask, On that note, where are we going to on healing this big wound on properties to recover most of our properties that was taken away from us?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like the mechanic, Tonina, this is my name. I happen to be secretary to an organization called Lower Niger Congress. Like the mechanic that steps in when the engineers have done their part. The summary of all of what we've gathered to do today is to say we won't let this happen again. But like doctors will do, diagnosis, prescription, and treatment in that order. What brought us to that point? What brought us to what we are saying should not happen again? If I were to answer that question, the constitutional arrangement that was the basis of the union that made Nigeria become one union, the three regions that should have been three different countries agreed on a federal basis, on a basis of autonomy, and it was Ahmadu Bello that listed the 8 points. At the point they rejected the independence proposition in 1953, it was Ahmadu Bello that made the demands that demanded the depth of autonomy that would be acceptable to the North to become part of that union. Where we went wrong was when we abandoned that in 1966. And all of what we have done since that 1966 to now is encapsulated in the document we call the 1999 Constitution. It wasn't written in 1999. The 36 states were not created in 1999, or the 704 local government areas, or the 68-item exclusive list, and all of the quota system and the mediocrity it has imposed on us as a society. So, if we are saying we don't want to get into that pit again, and you can't imagine how close we are to falling into a deeper pit. If we are saying we don't want to get into that pit again, we must now accept, and I join my voice to that of Chief Afe Babalola. He just told the country, I think it was yesterday, that we cannot proceed to another election on the basis of this constitution that guarantees all of what we are rejecting, whether it is the killings going on or the development that has gone south and all of the things that have gone wrong with us as a society. Thank you. The other thing we need to bear in mind is that there's a clash of civilizations we have to deal with. We can dodge it as we like. We have a civilization that owes it a duty of faith to kill the infidel. We have a civilization that says all men are not born equal. If we don't address that, and that's the summary of the lead keynote, Professor Akintoye's paper, he says, unless we go to dealing with those fundamentals, if we don't, we're wasting our time.
Thank you very much.
We are closer to losing the union than we can think.
Thank you very much. Emotions are running high here. Could I again? Yeah? No, could I? Okay, wine.
No, there's a young lady behind also.
This is the real lady, actually.
Thank you very much. I appreciate my being here. And I want to use this for, my name is Dr. Mrs. Ada Amasimalo. I want to use this, this forum to ask you to please spare a thought for all women who were tortured, bastardized, and who suffered, who went through hell, in quotes, during that war, and who are singing the song, Never Again. And here is one standing before you. I was a teenage girl during that war, and it was so much, they had to push us into the forest, 4 of us. And then we stayed there for 10 months, hearing the roars of animals, what the Igbos called Ajofia. That's where we are seeing the evil forest. We stayed there because of that. This girl's suffering now, the what you call IDPs and all those, and the rapes and the everything. So they pushed us there. This was in Owerri sector. Danet, and I recognize you. So I am now saying that please, from time to time, give opportunity to these people. Push them. Let them come and talk. So I suffered so much that I told God that if he saved me from this, that I was going to tell the world what happened. God answered that prayer. This is the prayer answered. The forest dames, 4 girls in the forest, abandoned, but they really worked hard and God helped them. They came out and worked themselves back to the. Please, it is selling out there at a very cheap price. Thank you very much.
God bless you. Young lady. Famugo Noga.
Finally, the non-Igbo participants.
Okay, go.
Hear other perspective as well. Quickly, madam.
Thank you. I felt I had to talk because I think I'm the youngest person in this room. And my question, I might be, okay, amongst the youngest person in this room. So my question is very simple, even though it comes with a preamble. Yes, my claim to being here is that my mother is an Adamazi, like the legend herself. My grandfather was the head of personnel for MPA for Nigeria and also Biafra during the war and back to MPA afterwards. My great-grandfather wrote Omenuko, the first novel in Igbo language. Unfortunately, I happen to be an American, but my mom brought me here and I fell in love with Nigeria. So since 10 years old, I've been researching. I was introduced to the to the concept of the Biafran War. I read about it. I've felt bitterness just from accounts of it. And I've gotten to the point that I love Nigeria as much as my Nigerian family. However, I've gone for this type of conferences so many times before. I'm a journalist. I've been to them in London, in Abuja, and here in Lagos. What is the point of the politically correctness of the language in this building, in this arena, if we believe what Professor Akintoye said before, that Nigeria is made up of nations? Then why are we so much holding on to the idea of Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Finally, please. Okay.
I cannot log Umunna.
I am a real Ekiti man and a younger brother to Professor Akintoye. And I'm glad they mentioned the issue of Konefa Joyi the other time. We are upright people who stand by the truth. And I really came out so that this will not be Ibo discussion, so that we can lace it with perspectives from other people. From what I've been hearing and from what I have read, 50 years down the line, I know the lessons and the lessons of the Civil War are still very much with us. And there is need for us to be realistic about the step forward. Now, it is political conspiracy that has brought this issue to this level. Again, there is economic conspiracy that is an offshoot of that political conspiracy, and it's only Professor Patutomi that mentioned it today. Now, so many people are jumping into the lagoon to take their lives. Sniper has become a tool in the hands of people who want to commit suicide with the traditional loose approach. You tie and then people who want to die because of the situation in the country will put their neck and that is it. But those are people who cannot stand firm to weather the storm and see to the end that Nigerian will bring us, and I know it's to good in Jesus' name. Now, what I want to say is that we can say everything at the intellectual forum like this. Are our leaders listening? Do our leaders read? Nigerians don't read. Most of these things have been articulated in so many books and articles. Yet, we are not doing about it 50 years down the line. Again, we have intellectual collaborators in power who will always pursue their own selfish interests and who will care less about their tribe and about even their families so far they are making their own money. It's one of the problems that has brought us to this level in Nigeria. Now, what I'm trying to say is that we can do a kind of individual approach. Write all you can, shout all you can. At the end of the day, you may end up in one of the dirtiest prisons in Nigeria, where they will keep you without people knowing. If they catch you, they will be treated as a criminal and a prisoner of war. The second one is the barrel approach. The guns can boom and speak language of death in the battlefield. At the end of the day, we'll still come to roundtable conference. And it's good we discuss things out now and iron out how do we move forward. I am an apostle of restructuring, and I believe Nigeria should be restructured.
Thank you very
how
much.
That should be done, should make collective efforts, a kind of constitutional conference for us to do that. But let us take all these ideas to our leaders, because I know they don't read. They don't read.
That's a good place to end.
Well, I don't know. The man moderators in our Noguchago will be watching on television. Thank you.
We have to stop now. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So as I said, it's a good place to end the conference. Again, let me thank the panelists and the resource person. The question of leadership in Nigeria that Professor Imasen talked about, I think a lot of it has to do with the national question. The poor leadership we have in this country today is the fallout of the structure of Nigeria. That's what has created this. And let's perhaps what Aki Oshitoku called, we need to go back to the first principle. Again, it's the whole question of restructuring. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the anchors.
I hope Mazi Alex Oti is still here. He has the special privilege and honor to do the vote of thanks. But ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please begin to think about all the matters we've discussed today. Very, very close matters to our hearts. I think, even if I'm quoted, so be it. This matter can end when we give the presidency to the Igbos in 2023. I have said that everywhere. But you heard what my sister also said, that the Igbos must have to come together, to work together, to cooperate more than they're cooperating now. Because I don't see why they cannot also have their turn. The South-South have had it, the Southwest has had it, the North has had it. So it is now left for the Igbos to work hand in hand and let this work. Now, Mazi Alex Oti, please come. Your hands please together for Mazi Alex Oti, a banker par excellence, a man who is a great philanthropist, a Nigerian and international person, but a man of very, very proud Igbo extraction. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman, the keynote speakers, the panelists, organizers, traditional rulers here. Let me start by thanking all of you for being part of this event today. You have been a most wonderful audience, and I believe that this is the beginning of the healing. I'd like to thank the organizers for deeming it fit to call Nigerians to begin the discussion about how to end the civil war. Because just like a few people said, people still believe that the war has not ended. Let me also thank the management of this place for making it available for us, and thank the masters of ceremony, Uncle Bisi, and the young lady, Ifeoma, right? Melody. So thank you for your labor of love. And my prayer is that this will never happen again. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Once my Ifeoma comes, once Ifeoma says the final, please wait for the national anthem, but just hold on for 1 second. We'll have the national anthem, please. Just say something.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us and being here all through the discussions. Just like we said earlier, it's a process of healing, so various frank talks have happened here.